my friends and enemies. I'm glad you were here. This is kind of a spur of the moment video because I was overhearing some of this topic, I guess, the best way to put it, over on Nerdrotic's channel. Shout out to Gary Beekler. And he covered a video on this topic, or I shouldn't say covered a video. He made a video on this topic, and it was very much something that kind of bothered me because it's been slipping into my mind lately of how it's become a thing in, I guess, the culture wars or the culture in general. And a lot of things don't add up when the term toxic fandom arises. And I wanted to put in my 2 cents. Not that it means very much to anybody, but I figured, hey, why not? There's a viewpoint I think people have not taken into consideration, and I would like to share that with you all, dear listeners. So, first off, I loved Gary's video, so go check it out at Nerdrotic's page about toxic fandom. Is just released on the 19th of January, and it's pretty good. It's very enjoyable to watch. They have excellent editing as usual. But yeah, go check that out. I'll try to put a link in the description. But when I think of toxic fandom, I think about what I hear fans of some form of a series, a movie, whether it be comics, film, book series, card games, whatever it could be, like any type of medium for enjoyment and entertainment. I see this kind of best way I could say it is a very small minority of people who typically end up moving into these things when they become popular, or it's something they enjoy, but they enjoy it so quietly that no one even knows they're there because regular fans are just there talking about, like, oh, this is cool, or what about this theory, or this thing or that, and they get into these little discussions. But what I've noticed is that this little minority comes creeping up from behind. They're climbing the wall with a vine and just sneaking over into the backyard and joining the party without anyone really noticing. And it bothers me because they constantly use these phrases like, oh, you're being toxic, when you dislike something that is produced, or you dislike the way someone is portrayed, and when you think something could be done better, like this could be done better, like why should I settle for less when I could have something that's well made? Which is a valid question, all things considered, and it really does put us into a position where we have to think, why, or not really why, but when did criticism of something that is produced become taboo? Like, forever that I can remember of, since the dawn of mankind, anytime a product or a service has been given, it had to be given in its most excellent form. Shout out to Bill and Ted, Excellent Adventure. But if it was something that was poor quality, you wouldn't sell very much of it, or you wouldn't be able to provide very much of it because no one would want it. And over time, I guess mid early 2000s to kind of like a little bit later, and more closer to the 2010 era, decade, I guess, where media became more of like, oh no, you can't criticize me for whatever I'm doing, right? So like if I make a film, make a show, if I write a book series, whatever, you can't just tell people it's bad. You can't criticize me for not doing a good enough job. Now, to one extent, people who make content, whether it be for a book series or games or movies, film, or whatever, they have there's a level of truth to it. You shouldn't just criticize something just because. There should usually be a reason as to why you're criticizing it. Is the quality good? Yes. Well, then you can't criticize the quality because you admit that it's good. Do people have different levels of good quality? Sure. I mean, we obviously know this because a normie typically looks at anything and says it's amazing, when obviously someone who is very specific about a topic goes into it saying, this wasn't done as well as it could have been done. And there's always going to be the one or two outliers that is like, hey, this was done horribly, it's trash. When in all reality, like, it wasn't horrible. It could have been better, but it wasn't horrible. Like, there's much worse things out there. So in that regard, I agree that you don't just go out and say this is trash because, but if there's a legitimate reason for it, then it actually will make sense in the terms of how it's applied. Is it applicable in every situation? Not always. Is it applicable in more recent situations? Very much so. So when somebody's like, oh, how dare you criticize this? They put you in this bubble called the toxic fandom. But then society, or especially the media, people who write articles, people who are access media, and people who want to get on the better side of the people producing the content so they can get their first look or free handbags of some sort. They do these things so they can get clout and they can get clicks and stuff like that. But it's at the same time, they do that because they want to shout down any criticism of their product or of the product that they're covering, and they want to normalize it as the thing. But as we've seen in recent months, just a whole lot of stuff come out as bloody crap, to be put gently. Or as our favorite Amerlin says, fish guts. It's not a very good quality to have of your product to be so ill thought of that any review of it, whether it be visual medium or physical medium, digital medium, whatever, is purely basically hate watching, hate reading, hate listening. Because you might be getting some clicks or some money or notoriety, but you're getting that bad kind of notoriety, and it's not the kind that's going to propel you into the next thing. Because if you make your first product horrible, the odds of anyone paying attention to the second product you make is probably slim to none. Like, you're just gonna be like, hey, this is great. Probably the first thing that comes to mind is the new Velma series. You just have to pay attention to the reviews, or if you dare watch it, get an idea that it's not even about the gang. It's not about Scooby-Doo. It's not about the characters. It has very little to do with it except for some slightly similar aesthetics, and even those slight aesthetics, not particularly similar. And everything about it is just adult, where Scooby-Doo was childlike. It's very much real life politicking and ideologues and things like that, instead of what should in fact be a very fun and entertaining, goofy type show that shows a bunch of kids going around with their dog in a mystery van, mystery mobile, whatever you want to call it, and pretty much solving mysteries. It's like the Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew, things that kids grew up on and loved, and they basically took it and changed it to however they wanted to, did a little personal inserting, and says, oh, this is how I've experienced life. And like, nobody cares how you experience life, because if they did, they wouldn't be coming into this thing. Like, they'd be doing their own, you'd be doing your own show about you, and nobody would watch it because nobody cares. What they came for was the Scooby-Doo connection. They came for, oh, it's another cartoon. this could be good. It could be funny. It could be entertaining. It could have a lot of cool mysteries and thoughtful writing. Not likely in this case. So in that regard, it's just it shows everything that's not Scooby-Doo. It's nothing like Scooby-Doo. And I'm not trying to turn this into a Velma type of video, but it's just the first thing that came to mind since it's the most recent and did horribly. And in doing so horribly, they're like, oh, people are review bombing it. I'm like, how is it review bombing? Review bombing just means a whole lot of people review. That's really what it means. Whether it's up or down is irrelevant. It's both review bombing. Now, the problem with the call of, oh, it's just review bombing, you can't believe what they're saying. And it's like, okay, well, when can you? When somebody releases something and says, hey, this is content, consume it. Just come and consume it. So you go over, you consume it, and you're like, I didn't like this. Well, you can't be like, oh, that's just because you're a bigot. That's because you hate everyone. That's because you hate these kind of people. You hate those kind of people. You hate this, that. You don't like anything. You're impossible to satisfy, blah, 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 blah. Like, that's not the case in most situations. There might be a fringe minority that thinks that way because they want to hate it because they want to hate it. But then there's people who want to consume good content. Very rarely do we get good content these kind of years. It's all in the past, it seems like, and hopefully in the future, but doesn't look too bright. But when things like Top Gun come out or Spider-Man, those are things that because they haven't had their scripts destroyed or the producers filling all this gunk into their commentaries about this political ideology or something into it to just shove it down your throat, they're just like, hey, thanks for watching our stuff. We really appreciate you guys. You guys are fans, the true fans. You came out to support us, and we did good. Boom, right there. That's literally it. Keep it simple, or as they say, keep it stupid simple, or simple stupid, depending on which side of the aisle you live. But essentially, we know that people will enjoy stuff. We know they'll give really good reviews. So why is it only these particular things? Is it because you ticked off the entire majority of the people who actually love and care for this? And you have the small minority of people who claim they love it, but are okay with all the changes under the sun happening. We saw it with Rings of Power, the fandom essentially turning and saying, no, this is not okay. And because it's probably one of the older fandoms, and it's also probably one of the more vocal, considering it's global fandom, as opposed to a lot of these other ones are mostly westernized fandoms, more specifically closed around Western Europe, America, Canada, that kind of stuff. The very quote-unquote modern audiences, where the rest of the world's like, we just want to have good entertainment. And then when you go to those places, those films bomb. They don't do as good. People who do go see it rave about how bad it was. And you can be like, oh, they just hate everybody. That's not a valid point when they're saying, here's the specifics as to why something is bad. But can we get something good? If you get something good, people will say it. This happened with House of the Dragon. This happened with, obviously, Top Gun Maverick. This happened with, obviously, Spider-Man. There are films that will do good. There are TV series that will do good. Terminalist was big hit. Reacher was a big hit. And there were some that were big hits, but I don't really understand how they were big hits. But I'm not really into them, so I don't pay attention to them. But their fan base seemed to like it. So it's something that they're going to get a good review for. If it's a good review, then power to them. But when their review is, oh, I liked people because they had a person of color in it, it's just like, that's racist, guys. You can't say that. It's a disservice to anyone who's acting in these films or writing these books or comics or whatever to be like, I like them because of the color of their skin. Because you're saying they don't actually have skill or talent. They got here because we needed someone to fill a check box. That's dehumanizing. That's demeaning. That's very racist, guys. You can't say those things and not expect to be called out on it. But when you get these other instances where they're like, here's the fandom. Fandom is a mixture of a plethora of different backgrounds, people from all over the place. Could be all over the world. Could be a large clump in one area and a small clumps in others, or large clumps all over, or small clumps everywhere. Different fandoms have different things. The Wheel of Time is obviously a very precious thing to me and those of us part of the questioners, and obviously the White Cloaks, Prophet of the Dragon, and others like that. It's a very precious thing to us. It's a major part of our lives. Even though we see it as an epic, because it is, it's not nearly as popular as Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter. It should be, but it's not. I would assume probably because of the length and the girth of the books. But it's by no means inferior to Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones is well written for the first couple books, in my opinion. There's differences on the further down the road stuff, but some people like it, some people don't. But they weren't bad written books, but they wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for Robert Jordan and the Wheel of Time. So it's not, and I don't mean to say that because like, oh, they would never get off the ground. I'm saying like legitimately Robert Jordan got George R. R. Martin, the publisher. Like legitimately, we would not have it. So something like George R. R. Martin getting taken off the ground and just doing really, really, really well, while the entire time you have the Wheel of Time sitting there, this treasure trove, gold mine of just amazing content, detail, and quality. It has its flaws in some instances, but overall, it's an amazing series. And being that we're fans of it, we're expecting the quality of the product to equate or equal to that level of epicness. We want the Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, Two Towers, Return of the King quality. We don't want Rings of Power quality. And if you notice, I didn't even say the Wheel of Time TV series quality because Wheel on Prime is not Wheel of Time. It's some amalgamation of attempt at it. And quite frankly, it was a poor attempt. And it was really sad that it ended that way. But that's the way cookie crumbles. And unfortunately, unless somebody can get their hands on the rights and actually treat it with the proper respect it deserves, it's unlikely we're going to get another rendition of it. Personally, I think an anime form would probably be the better because you can go as long as necessary. You can fill in all the details you want and still get really good, exciting episodes and be able to cover as much as you could from the books pretty easily and basically cover any objections that were required. Not everybody likes anime, and I get that, but it's the best form for those kind of things, especially when you have magical creatures, strange creatures, really like an entire, basically, country or nation of really tall Irish people in the desert. you can't really have that in real life unless you can just find a whole bunch of 7-foot people. Not likely. Not to the extent you would need, and let alone know how to act. But you can't show these super tall people outrunning horses and having plenty of stamina afterwards on a big screen like that. Like that's something you can do in an anime. That's something you can do in possibly a graphic novel form that's long form. I know we have a couple graphic novels, but it's not like the entire series. It should be, but it's not. But you could have an animation of it through anime where they usually hold to the actual core life and spirit of the story. And when the Wheel of Time, or the Wheel of Prime, I should say, aired, we were all excited when we heard the news, and then it slowly began to fade when we heard what they were doing to it. And then when it was released, it was this ultimate just disappointment. It was a spit in the face. It was a backhand attack on fans who didn't like it because you're a phobe, you're an ist, you're this, you're that. And it was just like their only argument for it was something that was just buzzword. We're just throwing them out like a machine gun. And when people are like, no, this doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to have a village in the middle of an isolated territory that doesn't have anyone added to the gene pool for thousands of years, is cut off from everywhere, came from another nation where even if they had a whole plethora of different ethnicity backgrounds, over the thousands of years of just interbreeding amongst themselves would have bred out any extremities, wouldn't make sense to have 50 different ethnicities in that little small isolated couple villages. It wouldn't make sense. They don't have the population of a massive nation that they originally were, because they get wiped out. So it wouldn't make sense for those things to happen. But they're like, oh, but we want people to see reality. I'm like, that's not even realistic in real world, but okay. And then they go on to like, oh, we're gonna wear these kind of clothes, use these kind of props, and it's just like, but none of this makes sense. We're gonna change the geographical outlay of the entire area just because, no rhyme, no reason, just because, looks nothing like the actual map. And why would we be happy with that? You skip major plot points. Why would we be happy with that? You didn't use the best actors available, that's for sure. So why would we be happy with that? You changed roles amongst people who are even in the same groups. You had very few lines from people who should be talking a lot more, and had a lot of lines from people who should be talking a lot less. You tried to play off this big wig actor in Rosamund Pike, but you didn't actually expect that to work with that role when you know that role isn't going to be the forefront of the entire series because of how the series goes. But you're like, we're going to change everything to make it about Rosamund Pike. And it's like, the why? Like, that's why things like Game of Thrones did really, really, really well, because they had a whole lot of no-named actors. They knew that the big actors like Sean Bean that they put into it, they can have, because we all know that Ned Stark dies. Like, he dies. He's not going to be there the whole time. So we can use this big-wig actor to sucker people in, and it worked, because everyone loves Sean Bean, and we get to watch him die for the millionth time. Poor guy, never gets a break. But we knew it. It wasn't like, I mean, first off, it's Sean Bean. We knew he was going to die. But love you, Sean Bean. But it wasn't like he was. They weren't going to change the whole book series just to keep Sean Bean in the series. That would make no sense whatsoever. People would be like, "What are you doing? Why are you ruining this? We love this series." That would be the outcry. Unfortunately, they didn't do quite that outcry for season 8. But I digress. There were so many things with the Wheel on Prime that it kept going off the rails. We're going to locations that mean nothing really important. We're going and doing things that don't really have a particular instance of valuable information. Like, everything we're getting is just kind of like in one ear and out the other. Like, it doesn't have a point. There's no purpose. You're wasting a lot of time, and then you're telling us that you don't have time to do the things that are in the book. That doesn't make sense either. So why would it be okay with that? And the fandom just keeps going, and then all we're doing is getting pelted with, you're toxic, you're toxic, you're toxic, you're toxic. And we'll go into it in a second to some things about what media thinks is toxic, which we probably know for the most part, but I found a couple articles. So for when Rings of Power came out, it had people going, what happened with the elves? Where are they getting their barbers from? Like, what, their Middle Earth, like Lorien barber shops or something? Like, what's going on? Why is Numenor stupid? Like, what's going on? How do people survive a pyroclastic, blast? Like, what is happening? Why are these fight scenes choreography like so bad? Like, there's swords like 10 feet away. I mean, that also happened in the Wheel on Prime. Like, it's supposed to be so flashy and so crazy and so awesome, but nobody pays attention to the details of, hey, that sword never actually got anywhere near the person they allegedly kill. There's no invisible extendo blades. It's just literally like they're 2 feet away, the blade stops, and that person over there is like, oh, my throat got slit open. Oh, no. Oh, I've been beheaded. Oh, no. None of it makes sense. You can go over and check out the White Cloak's coverage of the Wheel on Prime, and quite frankly, they did a good job with that. A lot of episodes, and they took their time with it, and it's very enjoyable. But they'll cover that more in detail. But oh my gosh, there's so many things in that series that just had problems. And then when Rings of Power, there's all these problems too. How does somebody travel for weeks? Weeks! Even days would be crazy, and then arrive in the same clothes that they've been wearing the entire season. They never change. Not even the basic stuff. They don't even change their clothes. With that massive budget, we didn't get a changing scene. Like that's insane to me. So a lot of things go into it, but ultimately people calling out ists and phobes and stuff, when people have legitimate concerns, if you take a story a specific way away from how it's originally portrayed, it's going to by default cut off paths that would otherwise be taken by characters, by the story, the way the actual plot is supposed to run, and we're expecting it to go. It'll swerve, and all of a sudden we're in a fantasy setting with Batman and Superman fighting off Darth Vader and the Sith. It wouldn't make sense then. Why would it make sense now? It doesn't make sense. Plain and simple. I'm not going to start talking about Star Wars. That's just a whole nother thing. But anyway, let's jump into some articles, like this lovely one from Odyssey. Of course, why are fandoms so toxic? Well, we'll get into the fandom's toxic thing a little bit later, but we'll go over this. Almost every fandom has its share of angry and toxic jerks, but why? This is their view of a toxic fandom. So toxic behavior is nothing new on the internet. True statement. Just not always the way you think it is. The internet's ability to create anonymity and distance between those who communicate lead us to displaying some ugly behaviors we normally don't see in a person. So from harassing fans to sending death threats to creators, I mean, those people are psychopaths and they deserve to get caught because you shouldn't do that. Like, don't send death threats to people. Don't have bad behavior, like actual bad behavior, not like, oh, I don't like your show. That's not bad behavior. That's just you sharing an opinion about something. It was like, hey, all these kind of things, it runs rampant on the internet, especially in internet fandoms. And fandoms usually a place to celebrate shared love of something. So why is there so much hate within them? Well, first off, yes, fandoms are a place to celebrate a shared love of something. That's a fandom. They actually got that pretty right, surprisingly. But here's the thing. Not all fans share the love of something equally. Not all fans celebrate that shared love equally. There are people who love it because it holds a special place in their lives and their memories, whatever it is. They grew up on it. Something like Star Trek has a massive fandom, and people don't want to go and see it just crash and burn because just somebody felt like doing that today. So then you have those who are like, oh, Star Trek, yeah, I like Star Trek, and then couldn't name a single movie, don't know who William Shatner is, couldn't tell you who Spock is, don't get the whole live long and prosper hand symbol for the Vulcans. They don't know these things. They don't know anything, but they claim to be fans. And it's like, well, even if you claim to be fans, you could still, I guess, be a fan, right? To some extent. But when you're sharing as a fandom as a whole, if the more hardcore fans, the ones who buy the merch, the ones who support that fandom in the entire industry, are the people you want to typically pander to because they're the ones who are going to buy your merch. They're going to consume your product. You don't just throw water on them, boiling hot water, and expect them to be happy about it. They're not going to be for obvious reasons. And like this one, it starts with somebody's love of something. Yes, it does. People typically join a fandom like Star Wars or Game of Thrones. Notice they left out Lord of the Rings. One of the largest fandoms in the universe, and they left it out. Okay. They have a love for that piece of media. Maybe they grow up with it, like I was mentioning earlier, or a portion of their childhood, also what I mentioned earlier. And they connect with the themes and characters on an emotional level. Pretty standard. They form a deep bond with the fictional characters and worlds, which makes it more emotionally distressing for them when they see the media they love being criticized or mistreated by others. That's where you're wrong. It's not that the fandom is being criticized per se. I mean, it is. Like, you have these new people showing up and saying, your series is toxic, your series is a phobe or an ist. We have to convert it into a modern audience so that's inclusive, because then it's good for everyone. It's like, it already was. You just decided it wasn't and wanted to change it. So, in terms of being mistreated, yeah, it's being mistreated all the time, typically by producers, directors, actors, the usual culprits. These pieces of media form a large portion of their identity, which you should never let a form of media be your entire identity. You can let it be a portion of your identity. Like, yeah, I'm a fan of Lord of the Rings. Yeah, I'm a fan of Wheel of Time. Yeah, I like Star Wars. Old Star Wars, not Disney Star Wars. Yeah, I like these things. But it's not like I am nothing without them. Like, there's still something else there. So, if you point out a piece of media that you like has racist or sexist undertones in it, it feels like they're calling you racist or sexist for enjoying that piece of media. Well, I mean, there can be unpleasant things in a series or in a fandom's source material. Like, The Witcher has things like rape, hangings, crazy things in it, but no one celebrates those things. It's just a part of the world building. The women treated poorly. It's a part of the world building. It's, hey, we have a guy who's here to stop that kind of stuff. Go for it. Same thing happens in Wheel of Time. There's bad stuff that happens in Lord of the Rings to the point where they literally have an entire war around it. Like, terrible things happen and good comes out of it because the good guys decide to stop the bad guys. That's literally how you do that. But you can't do that without showing bad stuff. So something being quote-unquote racist or sexist doesn't make sense to be like, oh, you're racist or sexist for enjoying that media, because that doesn't follow. Then people get overly defensive, emotional about media that they love to the point where they start throwing threats at the people making the criticism. Ironically, the entire criticism part is not of people making of the fandoms, but of the fandoms making it at the media being made and the people who make the media not liking that criticism. They have it backwards. Toxic fans take their love of a certain media to an extreme, and they start to become overly possessive. They act like media belongs to them and that their opinion of it trumps any other opinion one might have. Some people do. Not everybody. Now, here's the other thing. When it comes to people like this, it's not just my opinion is greater than yours. Ha-ha. It's, here's my opinion. Here's the reasons I have my opinion. It's in the source material is the biggest one, and you don't have to look very far beyond that for it to be a solid opinion. But if there's any differences, you can always look at the nuance of those differences and say, okay, which one holds to the source material? Because ultimately, that's what it means to be a fan. Is you're conversing about the source material. You're not conversing about not source material. So it would make no sense whatsoever to be complaining about something that doesn't even exist in the series. You're like, oh, like Wheel of Time, for example. You can't be like, oh, it's been whitewashed. I'm like, nobody has whitewashed the Wheel of Time. Literally, there's probably every single ethnicity is shown in it in its own regard. Like, you'll see people from all over the places constantly, thousands of characters that you actually get names and places that they're from, and many of them become main characters. There's a lot of main factions that are from all these different places. It's not like it's just white people. And even if it was like what people think that Lord of the Rings is, it's like, it's because it's based on a European folklore. What? It's a localized place on a particular continent. You'd expect it to be what it's historically going to be. But even then, they still have minor differences in terms of ethnicity. You got those who look more German and those who look more like Norwegian. Like, there's still variety amongst even those types. So there's still a form of diversity. But because it's the white people, it's the bad people. And if it's anything else, it's the good people, which totally isn't racist, don't you know? So then, they believe their opinions on the media even trumps that of the creators. I'm like, well, if the creator announced something and then they changed it, then the creator still wins because it's the creators. But if the creator contradicts themselves, then you follow the one that's logically fitting into the universe. You don't just take it to the one where it doesn't actually exist in the universe, but the author says so. The one I can think of that's the most famous is J.K. Rowling, famously or infamously stating on Twitter that Hermione is black. Like, out of the blue. And it's just like, why didn't you write that in the book then? Like, if that is the case, you should have put that in the book. Because that's part of a description. That's describing a person's character or features. If we can get Ron Weasley has freaking red hair, then obviously you can just mention things like that. Even if it's an offhand side comment, like her snowy skin or her darkened skin or her dark as a piece of chocolate or something. Like, there's ways you could go about it to describe it without being like, and she's black, or she's Italian, or she's Asian, or she's African, or she's this, that, or the other. Like, you don't have to say it outright. You can just lean into it. Like, it's the way to do it. But you can't just make it up and say, hey, Twitter people, she's black. That doesn't follow, because the source material itself doesn't state that. You can't just fill it in afterwards. You have to, like, follow the hair colorization, any of the appearances, whatever. But ultimately, I mean, that itself doesn't really matter. I mean, if she's black, no one cares. It's people either like Hermione, they don't like Hermione, they either like Harry Potter, or they don't like Harry Potter. I don't think people are going to throw a huge hissy fit about her being black if the source material said she was black. The fact that she did it the way she did it, she announced it as if everyone in the world knew it, and then everyone in the world's like, even people who are black, who are saying, I always thought she was white, because the way that the series portrays her apparently comes off as white. So nobody could take J.K. Rowling serious because of that. But it was just, that's when the author versus the source material come into play. Which one's right? Well, the author wrote the source material, and the author's stating an opinion of their own source material. Which one's going to come out right? Well, it'd have to be the source material, because it's the constant, whereas the author themselves could change every other week if they wanted to. You have to stick with what actually makes sense. And if it's something that was hinted at but needs clarification, that's a little different. But this wasn't a clarification. This was a blatant move to pander to someone because it's that time of the week to do so. Like, hey, somebody needs to be satisfied on Twitter, I guess. So, hey, Hermione. But be that as it may, it's not just because they don't do something you personally like. No one cares what the showrunner thinks the series should look like. Whether it be The Rings of Power, Wheel on Prime, or anything, whether it be The Witcher Blood Origin, or The Witcher in general, whether it be Velma, whether it be She-Hulk, whether it be any series whatsoever, we don't care what the opinion of the showrunner is. We just want the source material. People can like The Witcher, people can like She-Hulk, people can like the Scooby-Doo team, people can like these things and want, hey, maybe it'd be a cool idea to have a source of the Scooby-Doo gang through Velma's eyes. That'd be kind of cool, but then it's nothing like Scooby-Doo. It has nothing to do with it except some slight characterization, names, and appearances, slightly. And then everything else is like, this is a poor week on Comedy Central, and, well, every week is a poor week on Comedy Central, let's be honest. But it's garbage. It's not the actual material. So it's like, obviously we don't like this. Why would we? But then you have all the extra stuff where they, look at the Star Wars fandom. That forms a sense of entitlement surrounding the creation of media. They believe that their love of the media entitles them to be a part of the creation process. When they are rejected or ignored, they feel emotionally betrayed and start lashing out against those who ignore them. Well, it's not that they care about the part of the creation. It's just they want you to be true to the creation of it. Like, if you're making Star Wars, then make Star Wars. Don't make what you want Star Wars to be. Make what Star Wars is. And what Disney has done to it is not what Star Wars is. There are a plethora of reasons as why that's the case, but I'm just using the Star Wars because they mentioned it. There's resentment aimed at new fans who want to enter the fandom. But here's the thing: they want to end it or enter the fandom because of the poorly made stuff, not because they love, Star Wars the original 3 or Star Wars the prequels. They don't love it because of Star Wars pre-Disney. They want to enter it because Star Wars post-Disney, or post George Lucas, I should say. They want to join in on something that isn't even the thing that they say they want to be fans of. They want to be entertained. They don't want to have accurate media. So those new fans will probably like the media that another person doesn't like, so they consider those fans as not real fans. Well, I mean, to be fair, if you're saying, I'm a fan of Star Wars, I'm like, oh, so what's your favorite scene from Empire Strikes Back? They're like, the what now? Well, yeah, you're not a fan because you don't even know what it is. You couldn't even probably name, what's the first movie of Star Wars? Episode 1? No, it's A New Hope, Episode 4. Like, yeah, you don't even have the base functions. You're not a fan. You're a person who's here to be entertained. You're an entertained person, not a fan, which is fine, but that's why we call you normies. That's why you are, in fact, a normie in that situation. Just because you can say Kylo Ren doesn't mean A, you don't even know what that means, or B, that it's a big deal. Like, everyone's like, oh, it's Rey. Who? This is an original character from Disney that doesn't have any actual meaning to Star Wars fans. Now, could it have been? Yes, it could have been. Had Disney done it right, then yes, it could have been Star Wars. But they didn't. They just did it willy-nilly. They got Jar Jar Abrams, for one, and not to mention Rian Johnson, blew everything up way out of proportion. And then J.J. Abrams had to come back in and try to fix it. And of course, that didn't work out quite as well as you could have expected because they didn't bother with anything source material. Disney pretty much bans the extended universe of Star Wars, which has so much material. They could be making so much money for probably 100+ years of just Star Wars content consistently throughout the year. They didn't bother with it. That's on them. So they start dividing the fandom into two groups: the real fans who are met with respect, and the not real fans who are othered and treated with disrespect. This leads to harassment and bullying in an attempt to keep them out of these online spaces. That's not really how the infiltration works. The infiltration typically starts out with fans on a site, new fans showing up on the site, trying to take over the site, and then calling people a bunch of words that the site itself does not appreciate and will remove, and thus they take control from a hostile takeover, and people are silenced and censored because they don't share the same opinion as the new fans. It's very much the other way around. Should it be gatekeeping? Gatekeeping in itself can be good, but it can also be bad, depending on how it's done. But when somebody shows up and destroys an entire fandom, specifically a place they like to join as a community, like Reddit or someplace else, and they can't because you get kicked out. I mean, anyone who's been paying attention to the last year or so can just watch what happened to the White Cloaks on Reddit. Our White Cloaks pretty much just got nuked from orbit by Reddit because White Cloaks didn't agree with what was going on with the show or with the characterization of a whole bunch of other things. It's just like, okay, at this point, we want to speak our minds, and then they're like, how about no, we're going to remove your ability to make posts, we're going to remove your people and ban them because they're being quote-unquote toxic, amongst other things. And it's just this overall sense of just trash from the platform. And they're saying, they have the audacity to say, oh, it's the new people who are treated with disrespect. No. It's the people who have been there for a long time are treated with disrespect. They are the ones being silenced, not the other way around in most situations. So he's like, well, there's a typo, none without the E, of what I said, or what I said here. Here is H-E-R-E, not H-E-A-R, whatever. Sorry, I get caught in those things because I noticed them. It's meant to justify the behavior of these toxic fans. This is meant to show you these behaviors manifest in people and understand them better, and is the first step to avoiding them. When you really look at these same behaviors humans display when they talk about their religion or country, oh, we're bringing religion and nationality into this. That couldn't end poorly at all. So it's like humans are often emotionally attached to things, just like everyone else. Humans often had a hard time managing and expressing their emotions in a healthy manner. That's not how you spell manner. I don't know. This guy, what's his name? Nathan Rowe from Lindenwood University. Might want to take your English course again there, buddy. No offense. No personal attacks necessary, but just that hurt me just to read. But anyway, you can tell where this person stands based on how they're talking. They're trying to create this victimhood class of the new normie fans who come in and typically destroy everything that is loved, like a flock of or cloud, more than a flock, a cloud of locusts just wipes out farmland. Because if it gets destroyed, they don't care. They move on. They find another fandom to leech onto, and it goes on and goes on. Because all those guys are there for is to be entertained. They don't care if it's good quality. They don't care if it's bad quality. They just want to be entertained. If they have a good laugh in it, or if they enjoy the drama that's built up into the writing, they don't care. They don't care if it's bad acting. They don't care if the choreography is terrible. They don't care if the props look trash. You could be swinging a cardboard sword, and they'd be like taking it in because, oh man, that looks really cool. That's all they're there for. And there's nothing wrong with enjoying the simple things in life. But you can't go into that fandom and say, I'm actually a fan, when you clearly are not. Like, that's disrespecting actual fans of those series, people who have had those things. Sadly, a lot of old fans of fandoms have kind of morphed their viewpoints to that of the normies. They're like, yeah, I've loved this series for 20, 30, 40 years, whatever the fandom might be, and then say, these people have valid points, and we need to make this modernized, or we need to change it to fit reality, which literally, ironically, is not the point. Like, fantasy is to escape reality. Sci-fi is to escape reality. Even things that are made like Reacher or Terminalist that are in the real world, their escapism from your everyday life into those of something that's not realistically happening, more than likely. It's not likely that you have one dude who's super smart, built like a giant, and goes in, is very sarcastic, humorous to those who are watching, and solves crimes, beats up people, and kills some at the same time. That's not likely going to happen as he stops a crime syndicate of some sort. That's not going to happen in real life normally. That's a very, very far out there escapist idea that's supposed to be like, yeah, that sounds really cool, because that's what it's for. It's supposed to be there and be cool, but it's supposed to be the there that is the source material, not otherwise. So this is a view of why are fandoms so toxic, because they believe that the fandoms are the ones that are in fact the toxic ones, not the ones who are coming in and trying to change everything. Those people couldn't possibly be toxic. So we'll leave that there for now for that one. On the flip side, we have things that, if I could pull it up, because this is totally normal everyday things for me. This beautiful article by Gizmodo, because the bastion of thoughtfulness, philosophy, and entertainment, thus tech science culture. When fandom is the problem. If fandom is the problem, it ain't the fans, buddy. It ain't the fans. Fandom, the participatory community that grows out of a piece of media, has come to dominate pop culture. Well, there's no pop culture without fandom. Like, the whole reason it's pop culture is because there's culture built around something. That culture built around something is quite literally fandom. And here you go. Fandom, they say it themselves and don't even notice it. Fandom is not simply being a fan of something. Are you implying that normies can't be fans? What is this? Fandom is performing being a fan by creating transformative works, collecting knowledge, cosplaying, attending conventions, and ever increasingly being vocal online. That's not necessarily true, but okay. Some of this has been really great for people seeking communities they can't find in real life. Wait. Like seeking a series or a piece of media, per se, one could say, that you could not find in real life, like an escapist novel about how the world was created thousands and thousands of years ago, or ages and ages before what happened now. Like one that might say be created with song and flat, and then had two trees that had lighting the world up, and then everything changed, and then it became round, and then you had elves and humans and orcs and, dare I say, long living humans. Wait, that sounds like escapism. Huh. That's strange how that happened. I don't know what came over me. It's just like they totally missed the point of everything. But okay. So this has been really great for people seeking communities they can't find in real life, empowering them to be a part of something that means a lot to them. A lot that's not real life, because they're trying to get away from that real life. They're trying to get away from their work schedule. They're trying to get away from their required presence amongst those that they don't enjoy being around. Or maybe they do, it's too much for them because they're an introvert and everyone around them is an extrovert. Simple things. And some of it has empowered only the worst elements of fan culture. Oh, okay. Like what? Or the interplay between fandom and creators of media that can cause a dangerous downward spiral. Bad behavior of one enables the bad behavior of the other, until everyone else just leaves them both for dead. What? What? All of it is given a supercharge by the ability to use the internet to amplify opinions and target them very specifically. Oh, you just don't like people having freedom of speech. You think censorship is the answer, I bet. So while this can allow fans to point out flaws that should be fixed. Wait. I don't know, guys. That sounds a lot like criticism. We can't have that. Criticism would mean that people would expect better quality material. How could you ever say something like that? That sounds horrible. I know, right? It can also lead to dangerous amount of vitriol being directed at people who make and act in media. Well, people who make and act in media made and acted the thing that they're actually covering, like, I don't know, the source material, then you wouldn't have any problems. And I love this. The Sonic trailer debacle. It was a debacle before they fixed it. It wasn't a debacle after they fixed it. It's like, oh, kind of both things at work. It's like, the reason Sonic did so well was because they changed it. Because they listened to the fandom and said, hey, maybe we're not going to make this nightmare terrorish thing, whatever it is, this blob of blue and white with human teeth and real shoes. Maybe we're going to take that and make it more like what Sonic is actually known for, and how everyone who loves Sonic will actually see Sonic. Let's change it to fit that instead. And then it just booms. It does so well. Everyone liked it. I don't know people who were just like, man, Sonic was terrible. Nobody said that. Was it done more in a normality side, like, obviously in the real world? Then yes, it was. Is that horrible? Not entirely. Could it have been done in the Sonic world where they don't have normal cars and stuff, where they have like flying ships and fast running, lots of golden rings to run and gather, going through loop-de-doops? Sure. Could they have had animals that were turned into machines that they could be saved by Sonic and friends? Sure. But they didn't. But it still came out okay. It was still fine. People didn't hate it. It wasn't that bad. It was just a nightmarish way to show Sonic to people, and it was not going to do well, guaranteed. Just the trailer alone and the poster of it was going to be enough to keep people away from it. It was going to bomb. And then some corporate executive was going to be like, well, nobody likes Sonic, so we're throwing this out. It's like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's like Sonic, the whole fandom, the community, and the source material is not the problem. It's how you portrayed it was the problem. They fixed it, and therefore it did well. And it gets a sequel. Wow! And it did well. Wow! It's almost like they did the right thing and made money from it and profited. Wow! What a concept. But then we see, 2 events of this year show the dichotomy really well. The Hugo nomination of Archive of Our Own, don't even know what that is, and Rotten Tomatoes changing its review policy. Like, I don't know what Archive of Our Own is. It's a staggering achievement, apparently, but it's a fandom that nobody really knows, I guess, or maybe I'm the one who doesn't know. Maybe everyone knows it except for me. Wouldn't surprise me. I'm not exactly diving headfirst into pop culture of things just randomly popping up. I typically hold to the series and stuff that has been around and has a giant presence. But okay. It's a non-profit that fanfic writers would never have to worry about losing their platform. Whatever. I mean, I guess it's a place that's like a fan fiction website, maybe? I guess. Maybe. That's what it appears to be based off of this, where it's basically deletions of live journal, previous experience with the advertiser-funded fanfiction.net, rules against certain kinds of fanfiction, and other similar incidents went on to the creation of the archive. Sounds like a website. With it, fan creators have a site that does not have to worry about advertiser pressure or caving to copyright claims. That sounds actually kind of cool, surprisingly. I'm not a huge fan of fanfiction, but hey, if somebody wants to tell a cool story and people want to support it, go for it. And it houses 4.8 million works as of 2019 and over 32,500 fandoms. Okay, cool. That's about 5 million stories, audio recordings, pieces of art, and so on, based on the existing books, comics, video games, television shows, movies, basically anything you can think of. Now, I wonder how many of those are actually based on it, because a lot of fan fictions and stuff really pull away from the core of what makes a series, or a medium. But anyway, then it's a nonprofit organization for transformative works, which does things like file comment and appear on panels advocating for legal protections for fan-created content, which is nice, especially in the area of copyright. Now, I mean, assuming they're not making money off of these copyright things and like basically plagiarizing stuff, I think that they pretty much are okay, unless somebody really, really doesn't like you using their content, and then you just gonna have to suck it up and deal with it. But most people are not horrible about it. If I remember correctly, Robert Jordan was pretty hard on fan projects just due to the fact of people were not going to be able to do it quite as good as him. And for the most part, he was correct, considering the amount of people who talk about his works now. But they get a nomination, and it's a recognition of the sizable contribution fan makes. It's the good size of fandom being recognized. I'm like, okay, let's give him that. But it gets worse. This year, in response to trolls preemptively leaving negative feedback for Captain Marvel, trying to tank the movie's audience rating before it even came out, Rotten Tomatoes decided to disable the comments for movies until they are released. But what if somebody sees the movie before it's released? Don't they still have a valid comment? A valid review? I mean, are the only people who can see it before critics? Can't anyone just see it? Like, okay. But here's the thing. If anyone's leaving a review rating, it's possible. I'm not saying it's a good thing to do, but it's possible that they saw the trailer and the trailer looked terrible. And they're like, wow, this doesn't make any sense at all. This doesn't look like the source material. This doesn't look like the comics. This doesn't look like Captain Marvel, let alone Captain Marvel. what's going on with this? Why is this look like a woman empowerment movie rather than a comic book about a woman who's very powerful? Like, yeah, you're just making something that just doesn't seem to fit, and people don't like it, and they're like, "Wow, this trailer looks horrible. Don't bother watching it." That's still a review. Now, maybe they should do trailer reviews, and that's where they put it, and then leave the rest of the reviews for things. But if you change it to when the movie comes out, then the movie comes out, and people are going to leave a review saying it's bad. Like, if it's a bad movie, it's a bad movie. If it's a good movie, it's a good movie. Like, the time in which the review is left is almost pointless as long as it's a true review. But here's the thing. We know, because a lot of these sites have been caught, fluffing the reviews, you guessed it, before it even came out. And they'll try to make it sing its praises before it even came out. So they're saying, oh, well, we're trying to counter things by boosting it before it came out, but everyone's trying to tank it before it came out. I'm like, aha, right. An extra bulwark against this kind of abuse, the site later on decided to restrict the scores from non-professional reviews. In other words, if you're part of the audience, your review means less. Just regular people, you don't mean very much. I hope you like that. And that makes up the average audience score to only those who could prove they had actually purchased a ticket to the movie, which is kind of fair, to be fair, but how do you do that for every single individual person? Do you have to, like, type in something on your ticket? What if you lost your ticket? What if you threw your ticket away, not expecting to need it? Like, you're like, oh, I'm in the film, throw it away in the trash can. I don't need it anymore. I want to leave a Rotten Tomatoes review. Well, I can't because I don't have my ticket anymore. Like, what do you do? How do you reconcile that? You can't. There's certain things that will just prevent it. So it's just censorship. So the new hoops that Rotten Tomato put in place are important check in the tactics of trolls, and is a spotlight on how gross and entitled their behavior is. Yes, because you're not gross or entitled in your behavior right now writing this article. I mean, this is a fairly older article, if I remember correctly, but they somehow think they get some form of special treatment, I guess. The kind of trolling and harassment that follows movies like Captain Marvel, along with the bitter infighting among vocal or big-name fans, is what turns a fandom toxic. At this point, toxic is almost a term of art. But it is truly the right word to describe fans so invested in a particular property that they act out to save or quote-unquote save or quote-unquote defend it, tainting the whole thing for everyone else. If they have to save it, you've already destroyed it and tainted it. That's the beginning of everything. You can't save or defend something that isn't being destroyed. If it's not being destroyed, then no one would have to defend it. If you make slight changes, people are like, I'm not really a fan of this. That's not saving or defending. That's just saying, hey, something's not the same about this. It's no longer the thing I enjoyed or that I have been following for however many years. Even if you're a brand new person, it's like, well, this isn't exactly. I just read this book for the first time, or I read this comic for the first time. I read this Captain Marvel comic because I really wanted to like Captain Marvel, and I watched this movie, and that's not accurate at all. Like, that's not how this actually came about. Oh, you're just a toxic fan. I'm like, I literally just started. It doesn't make sense. And then they go into this was like, oh, well, it's not a new problem. Drama is inherent to any community, especially ones where passions run high. Well, it's not a fandom if you don't have passions. It's literally a fandom because of passions. You like the thing you like. You're passionate about it. Well, duh, it's going to be a passions running high. In the olden days of fandom, by which I mean only 15 years ago, a community developed just to track these kind of meltdowns. It's called Fandom Wank. What a great name for probably a lot of great people who pay attention to those things. And it catalogs some truly complicated fandom fights. And these days, fandom is inextricable from the people who make the primary work. what used to confine to places like Fandom Wank and live journal effects what everyone sees on screen. Twitter, Instagram, and other social media platforms give toxic fandoms an avenue for attacking people who work on the things they are ostensibly fans of. Again, you hate people's freedom of speech to say something about this. You don't like other people's opinions because you think that this should be amazing. It's amazing to you, and it should be the best thing since, well, the next best thing. Or the previous best thing, I guess. It's the next best thing is always going to be the best thing for you because you can't critique anything. If you critiqued anything, you become toxic from your guy's own point of view. Fandom drama takes over social media after a new trailer or episode. Well, yeah, because people start talking about it. They want to know what's going on with it. That's literally the point. Like, fandom's supposed to discuss things. I mean, it's nice when a fandom does it respectfully and they do it with an understanding that it's just a person's preference. But when somebody's like, no, we're going to make this thing different according to our opinion rather than the source material, that's when it gets a little out of hand. It's like, oh, it starts as gifts of a particularly great moment, then becomes a dissection of screenshots, then criticism, some legitimate and some not. Oh, so there are some criticisms that are legitimate. Huh. Now, who gets to say those are legitimate criticisms or not? That's where things get a little bit hazy. So, people start yelling at each other, generating post after post, tweet after tweet. Well, yeah, because not everyone's emotionally stable, and people can turn into children really quickly doing that. But that's because, as you mentioned before, they're passionate about something. All of which helps marketing as it keeps the movie trending. In turn, trailers are becoming designed for this kind of dissection. Well, yeah, they're doing it on purpose to trigger people. They're like, hey, we can make this movie be a trending thing for a long time just by ticking off our audience. Pretty bad marketing move, in my opinion, but okay, let's see if it pays out for them. In turn, trailers are becoming designed for this dissection, which is why they often include Easter eggs for fans and shots that will never be in the movie. This is why you see official hashtags on Twitter with custom emojis, all the better to make fandom part of the official brand. But now fandom is covering by the press, major mainstream press, even in the trades, which wields outsized influence among Hollywood executives. Certain properties, studios, networks have decided to cater to fandom. No, they haven't. Not even remotely. In some cases, they don't just cater, they rely on the fandom. A pre-existing fandom is guaranteed audience and will buy multiple tickets. That's how it would work. Blu-rays and toys. Yeah, that's how it would work if you do it right. Like, oh, well, a lot of people making TVs and TV show and movie adaptations of old properties are fans themselves. No, they're not. In most situations, they are most definitely not. They're more likely to be sensitive to fandom critics. They should be, but they're not. Writers and showrunners are on social media too, which makes them feel quote unquote reachable to fans. Most of the time, it's an intern dealing with that stuff for them. Like they're dictating their words to the intern to type onto their social media. It's not actually them in most situations. And if it is them in those situations, they still have bad takes. Like bad takes. A feeling amplified when they do things like live tweet their shows, answer questions, or defend controversial decisions on social media. Well, if you didn't put controversial decisions in it, you'd probably be following the source material. Wouldn't be making many controversial things then, but that's how you don't make drama, and drama draws attention to your stuff, and you want everybody to watch it. Unfortunately, it won't be the way you want them to. None of this is bad on its own, what is bad is the way certain fans have abused this newfound feeling of accessibility and ownership. It's not accessibility, and it's not ownership. People have these opinions on forums for a long time before these people ever came to Twitter, Instagram, and other places. Giving fans ownership over a thing means some of them literally believe they own it. That's not how that works at all, not even remotely. That they are due only work that conforms to their opinions. It's not their opinions when it's the source material. And there's the problem Rotten Tomatoes ran into. Kelly Marie Tran being bullied off of Instagram because some supposed Star Wars fans didn't like her character. That's not her fault. That's the writer's fault. they didn't do her justice. I don't think people were bullying her off. Pretty sure they already confirmed that that didn't happen that way. It happened something else. She took herself off, and that was that. She could go on at any time. Nobody hates Kelly Marie Tran. They didn't like her character because her character was crap, because it was written crap. Like, what do you expect? Poor writing to be rewarded by everyone throwing hundreds of millions of dollars at you? That's not how this works. You can't get lazy and get paid lots of money. But the reaction that says anything positive about Last Jedi or saying anything negative about Zack Snyder era DC movie gets, and there's whatever happened in the Steven Universe fandom. I don't know anything about Steven Universe. It doesn't look like anything I would be even remotely interested in. So if anything happened there, they probably deserved it. just saying. I'm not really a fan of Zack Snyder. I'm not really big into DC. I was always a big Marvel person. I stopped paying attention to Marvel before Captain Marvel even came out. So I haven't really paid attention to them forever because they don't deserve my money. That's because it's the easiest way to say it. And they don't deserve my loyalty, that's for sure. There's a point at which a toxic fandom, or at least one whose very vocal minority is toxic, ruins the thing that created it. No, coming in and changing everything about it ruins it. It was created to be the way it is. It's not created for you to change how it's perceived by everyone. This is obvious. Toxic is the exact right term because it pollutes the very ground from which it grows. But it wasn't toxic before, and then you came along, and now it's toxic. Coincidence? I think not. Or I guess coincidence, I think yes. It's a little too coincidental. More than one person has mentioned Rick and Morty to me as a show they can't enjoy or admit they enjoy, and not because of the problems of the creators, but because of the problems of the fans. I don't know much about Rick and Morty, but it just seems like a silly, weird show that I could never possibly keep up with. But if somebody likes the show for a particular reason, and then they change that reason, that's going to cause problems, obviously. Whatever the creators' issues are, I don't know. I probably don't even really care. Star Wars is both cultural juggernaut and an inexhaustible source of the discourse, and a certain segment of DC fans has made it truly miserable to like, much less dislike, one of those movies. I don't know what Star Wars and DC has to do with each other, but okay. People leave fandom all the time. Well, when it ceases to be the thing that they loved, they have no reason to stick around. And the people who are leaving are typically the ones who have the wallets. Writing about leaving fandom is practically a genre unto itself. Yeah, usually by the people who are wanting attention. But being disengaged from fandom alone doesn't mean fandom stops affecting how you experience the work. Well, yeah, I just said that. Fandom, for all its extremes, still is not the majority of people who consider themselves fans. If you are a fan, you are part of fandom. If you are not part of fandom, you are not a fan. This is quite literally how fandom works. This is how fans work. I can't be a fan of something if I am not part of its fandom. Because a fandom is literally the fans of thing. Does this person have struggle with reality? And they talk about box office for Star Wars. The number of people are contributing to Wikipedia, writing fan fiction art, making fan art, going to Star Wars Celebration, or harassing Kelly Marie Tran makes up a tiny portion of the number of people going to the movies. Well, that's because normies will always outweigh the popularity of the thing. Whatever the fandom, pick a fandom. It's going to get overwhelmed by people who are not fans really easy because there's always more people not fans of a fandom or of a series than those that are fans. By default, it's literally impossible to have fandom be larger than the non-fans of the people who come in. That's stupid to even talk about. It's more possible to be something without in fandom or be aware of it, since fandom these days requires you to be extremely online. Well, not necessarily, but it does help. You could go down to your local store, local pub, whatever it is that has people who enjoy what you enjoy. Like people who enjoy soccer or football, they go down to a pub or a bar. They watch their sports and hang out with each other. Like, you don't need to be online for that. It helps in instances where your buddies across the country and you want to watch it online together. That's one thing, but that doesn't require online. It just helps. Studios and creators see and cater to these fans all the time in benign ways and in not so benign ones. Studios and creators use fans as shields against reviewers and even other fans. Yeah, they use the normies to shield themselves against the actual fans of the fandom and against the reviewers that are probably fans, which ironically, even the ones that aren't fans review it and say, that's not so great, and they're still getting thrown in the same category as the toxic fandom. And they also, do things like using random positive tweets in their marketing. They use concerns about what fans want as the basis for the reactionary cover for cover bad decisions or to fuel defensiveness. Well, yeah. And so there's still a cultural idea of what a Star Wars fan is and a hangover from an era for where Star Wars was still massively popular, but the fans were characterized as basement dwellers with no lives. And so, if Rise of Skywalker walks back the most controversial parts of Last Jedi, there's a group of fans who will declare victory, who will declare some ownership of that decision. Well, I mean, they probably couldn't rightfully do that just because there's no way you can actually claim that ownership, because if somebody comes in like a different director and is like, wow, that last movie was terrible, I have to fix it somehow, because their story has to make sense because their name is attached to it. So I don't know anybody who does that. They might declare victory that a horrible thing might get salvaged a little bit, but nobody says that about Disney Star Wars because nothing there is salvageable. It's literally been burnt to the ground. Its corpse danced on a million times by Disney and Lucasfilms. There's no way that's going to happen. But they're emboldened to keep acting this way. You have no proof of that. And so it becomes, once again, something of an embarrassment to actively declare yourself a Star Wars fan. Not as embarrassing as a person who writes articles about toxic fandom, but okay. There's a lot of debate about what to do with art when the artist behaves badly. Enjoy the art for the art, and if you don't like the person who makes it, don't support them. Literally that simple. The link between an artist and their art is clear. Is it though? Because apparently you can't see that. Because when people don't support the thing that you want them to support, you're like, oh, you hate this artist because of X, Y, and Z. Or I just hate it because it's trash. There's an idea. It's not good, so I'm not going to support it. Why would I support something that's not good actively? Especially when they're still alive. I know people who are dead and their series are more well respected because people just look at what they say about it and like, this is not a contest. But then there's nowadays people who just take that and throw it out the window. It's like, I don't care if they said it was not a contest. It's the way I want to be because it's my opinion. And that's taking over the quote unquote fandom. That's the toxic fandom that we have to fight. And they're going into the whole death of the author thing, and none of this really means very much, but it's basically people saying, oh, are you a real fan? What makes this a real fan? The defense the creator makes is liking their interpretation of the beloved property is what makes you a quote-unquote real fan. It's a fandom purity test, and somehow as liking my stuff is giving a sense of superiority over the regular people who have real problems with something. The fans on the studio side are the real fans suddenly. Well, except that goes for your statement as well, but okay. Nice try to two-face that one, but okay. Even the positive situation where fandom rallies to save a show or fund the movie, the fans suddenly have some claim to ownership of the art. Well, they're the supporters. They're the foundation. They are the very cornerstone of that product or that project. And without them, it doesn't exist. So kind of in a way they do. They don't own the ability to get profit from it, but they do have the right to say, I am a fan of this, I enjoy this, and yeah, I helped a portion of this to actually become a reality. It's like a Kickstarter. You have a sense of ownership when you have the Kickstarter exclusives or the Indiegogo exclusives because you helped raise the funds for it. It would not exist if you did not come there and give them your money. I'm not saying you own a portion of the company. I'm not saying you own stocks. You don't own anything like that in that way of owning, but it's very much not the way they're portraying it at all. And they're like, it's not quite the death of the fandom is being the answer. It's not a bad thing that a devoted fan base keeps the show alive. It's not a bad thing that fandom can interact with creators to display displeasure. the 100 killed off the character Lexa after the show. It spent a lot of time hyping her relationship with Clark. Nobody cares. Which struck many as an example of the bury your gays trope. Again, I don't think anybody cares because they canceled that whole show, didn't they? I think I started watching it and then they canceled it, and I was like, well, why would I continue this? It's already canceled. And it's like, well, queer characters exist simply to die in order to further the story or the emotional impact. That's literally any character. It's called fridging. You kill somebody to force somebody out into the world and to do something. They literally did that in the Wheel of Time. Wheel of Prime, I should say. Not the books, but in the actual TV series that Amazon did. So it doesn't even make sense in that regard. But and they just keep going on about fandom. It's more diverse than Hollywood in general. No duh. Does it often have some expertise to offer? Sure. They pick up on things that are obviously like whitewashing. Oh, because diverse washing is so much better. Even though whitewashing means you're actively changing something that isn't white to white, which in most situations is not the case. I think it just is white, and then it stays white because it was originally white. And that's the same thing as Black Panther being... It's like claiming Black Panther's blackwashing. That would make no sense. It's literally an African nation full of Africans who are black. How could they possibly blackwash it? So when you go to something that's European, and it's European where it's white people, because it was the source material said it was white, how could it possibly be whitewashing? It's not. It's not black people being raced. It's redheads. It's like a freaking joke now, which is like, oh look, another redhead's gone from existence. Anybody seen Ariel from the new Little Mermaid? It's literally redheads being wiped out. In so many shows they're wiped out. It's very rare to see them anymore. And the rare occasions we do get them, it's rare. It's very rare. So this goes on and on. It just stops. It's basically studio networks have to learn the difference between real criticism and disingenuous complaints. Yes, but who gets to call them disingenuous complaints? Who gets to say it's real criticism? If somebody shows up with the bullet points of all the reasons this thing is wrong and how to fix them and whatnot, that's what I would call a real criticism, not a disingenuous complaint. But you'll mark it as a disingenuous complaint because you don't like it. Your opinion of it is not fact. They're showing actual facts to you, but you don't care because you're an emotional wreck. Ha! They have to actually learn how fandom operates instead of just feeding it and letting toxic elements dictate their actions. The only good thing to come from James Gunn debacle is the hope that some lesson along those lines has been learned at the highest levels. James Gunn, I think they're referring to the James Gunn being fired from Marvel and whatnot for this particular article. I gotta remember when this was actually written. Yeah, 2019. So this, I think, he got fired for some of the stuff he was doing. They're not referencing the DC stuff, but this is the common mentality even today in 2023 of how this fandom works. It's the fandom is the problem. The people who like this source material, they're the problems, not the people bastardizing the source material, not the people changing things from what the fans like to something that the fans don't like. It's completely the opposite. It's literally the people who are making it that are doing it wrong, which is why the fans lose hope in these projects. They don't look forward to them. They start out excited, and a sense of horror and dread fills them, and then we stop liking what we once liked. That's the reason. Fandom isn't the problem. It's very much Hollywood. It's very much publishing companies, corps, suits, the guys who don't care about the source material. They'd make a lot more money if they listened to the fandoms and paid attention, but they don't care. They're going to make their cut no matter what. Even if everything collapses, even if they stay in debt, they're still getting paid because that's just how things work. But in that regard, I am thankful for for Henry Cavill, because the dude is a gem. He is a precious commodity. He is the Declaration of Independence and to our Nicolas Cage. Like, he is the thing we have. He's our national treasure, and he's not even American. How's that funny? But he went into a fandom for The Witcher, left it because they disrespected it, and wanted Superman to be good. They canned Superman because they wanted to restart everything, which is a very dumb move on Warner Bros. Part, but whatever. Zaslav made his decisions, I suppose. But the one thing we do get out of it is Henry Cavill is going to produce and be in, possibly even direct, a Warhammer 40K TV show. And boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. I'm there for Henry Cavill. I've heard good things about Warhammer 40K. I know very little about it. I'm more into the regular Warhammer fantasy stuff. And even then, I'm only fairly new to that as well. I don't have miniatures because I do not have a wallet that can sustain that. But I like good stories, good action, good dialogue, an excellent plot, things that are respected from the source and the lore. And all signs are showing to Henry Cavill's going to do that. So that's something we have to look forward to. So there's still hope that eventually it'll turn around. It might take a long time, but there's always hope. But anyway, thanks everybody for hanging out. I know this was a little bit longer. I wasn't really intending it to be this long, but the two articles had a lot to go over with. And there's a lot of craziness, and you can't really cover craziness necessarily short unless you just have a really good editor. And I wish I had Perry Chan. I kind of edit my own video, so it's not going to be nearly as good. But I will say it's a struggle to do these kind of videos because this was very spur of the moment. I literally just decided to do this today, and I was just like, oh no, what's going to go down on this? But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here. Thanks everybody for hanging out. Your support means everything to us at the Questioners, and go and support those like the White Cloaks, Prophet of the Dragon. Everybody out there needs a little bit of attention to help grow their channels. They're bigger than me, but I want to see them get bigger. I want to see them succeed. So go out there and share their stuff, watch their stuff, support them however you can. It's wonderful to see people who care about fandom and see the actual real toxic ones be the ones who are entering in and causing the destruction of all of our beloved things that we enjoy. But thanks again once, and not for all, but for all future endeavors. Thanks for coming and hanging out with me this one time. And just remember, walk in the light, my friends.